Yo, what's good? My name's Kang, and in this video, I'm going to be going over how much I spent in my 4th year of university. But before we get started, I thought it'd be fun for you to guess it down in the comments how much I spent, and while you're down there, please hit the like button because it really helps the channel grow. Okay, so I recently graduated from computer engineering at McMaster University, and engineering is notoriously known for being an expensive degree. On top of that, living away from home can be expensive as well. So I thought it'd be fun to do a little experiment and see how much I spent in my 4th year, considering, I have a YouTube channel about personal finance. So to start, I took a year off between my 3rd and my 4th year in order to do internships to gain experience and also save up some money, which I highly recommend doing if you have the option to. So entering my 4th year, my total tuition cost was $13,689.25. Of that almost $14,000, $12,700 came from Mac, and the other $1,000 came from an online course that I took at Athabasca University. From OSAP, I got a $5,000 grant as well as a $7,000 loan, but since I saved all that money from my internships, I decided to only take the grant portion. So after some math, the total that I had to pay is just around $8,600. I lived in a house with 10 people and it was $527 a month for rent, utilities, and internet. And I think for Hamilton, that's about average. As for food, I tried my best to grocery shop and meal prep, but even though we were staying home because of COVID, I still managed to spend so much money on fast food, mostly because I was lazy. Between fast food and groceries, I set a flex budget of $250, and every time I went home, my mom also gave me some food because she's the GOAT. For my phone, I'm with Chatter and have unlimited calling and texting and 3 gigs of data a month, which comes out to $45, which I think is also about average. I had a fun and entertainment category, which I would normally spend for movie tickets and going to events, but since we can't do any of that, I mostly just spent it on board games and video games, and I set a budget of $50 a month for that. For clothes, I had a budget of $50 a month, but looking back, that didn't really make any sense at all because I wasn't going anywhere. For transportation, my cost was $0, again, because I'm not going anywhere. As for alcohol, I had a budget of $50 a month because there's nothing better to do, and again, I'm not going anywhere. And finally, I had a miscellaneous category where I just threw in any expenses that didn't fit well within my budget. So now that you have a general idea of my budget, I'm gonna go over how much I spent each month, and then at the end, I'll give you the total. So in September, I had to pay a big chunk of my school, which ended up being $5,400. I also went over budget in my food and alcohol category, mostly because I just moved in and I needed to get the staples like oil, spices, and a couple 2-4s. The total for the month of September was around $6,200. In October, I had to pay for an online course at Athabasca University, which ended up being around $900. October is also when Mac has his first semester reading week, and I ended up staying at home for an extra 2 weeks, which really drove down my alcohol and my food costs, mostly because I was home for half of the month. The total for the month of October ended up being around $1,800. In November, I didn't have to pay for school anymore, which was great, and I spent a lot less money on my food category, probably because I was bringing food from home. I did, however, spend a lot on my miscellaneous category, mostly because I was spending money on gifts for friends. The total of November was close to $1,100. In December, I went home pretty early because all my exams were online, which ended up making my food bill pretty low. Everything else this month was pretty normal. I spent a little bit over budget on alcohol, and I actually spent a lot on the miscellaneous category just for Christmas gifts. In December, I ended up spending about $930. Okay, so now we're rolling over to the new year, and this is when I made a new spreadsheet so my transactions are a little bit more accurate. In January, I had to pay my 2nd semester of school, which ended up being around $2,200. Aside from that, everything else this month was pretty normal. My food bill was pretty normal, and I was slightly under budget in my alcohol category. So the total amount in January I spent was around $3,100. In February, Mac has his reading week for the 2nd semester, so I was at home for a bit. Because of that, I didn't spend that much money on food. I did, however, spend a lot on the miscellaneous category for buying Valentine's gifts for the boys. In total, I spent around $850 for February. In March, my spending was pretty normal. I was slightly over budget in the food category. This time, it was mostly fast food. And I was also really under budget in alcohol, and I'm really not sure why. Everything else is pretty normal this month, and I ended up spending just over $1,000. And finally, we have the last month of school, April. This month, I spent only $130 on food, and I honestly do not know how I survived. Honestly, all I ate was instant noodles and McDonald's. During the month of April, I probably had enough sodium for the rest of my life. Aside from that, everything was pretty normal, and I spent just under $800, which is the lowest out of all the 8 months. So after adding everything up, the grand total for the 8 months was just over $18,000. And if you take that number and you average it across the 8 months, I ended up spending around $2,250 a month. Now, these are the numbers that I would directly attribute to living at school, but of course I have some expenses that I didn't add on there, like for example, this tablet, or this monitor, or even all this camera gear that you can't see. So if I added those things in as well, I'd probably spend closer to $20,000. And on top of that, since I was living with 10 people, it was really confusing sometimes because we would be constantly buying stuff for each other. And we use Splitwise and it's a great tool and all, but at some point it's just too much sauce for everyone to handle. I mean, just try to imagine figuring out a 3 a.m. Uber Eats order between 10 people. So if I were to adjust the total amount to include all of the missed Splitwise transactions, I'd probably add another $200 to $300 split between the food and the alcohol categories of my budget. Looking back at my budget, I can definitely see that I overspent in fast food. In hindsight, I probably should have grocery shopped and meal prepped more, but it was a pandemic, so you can't judge me. I'm also surprised at how little I spent on alcohol. In my previous years, I spent way more, but that's probably because I was going out and this year there's nothing to do, no parties to go to, so I guess I spent less. I'm also realizing that I should create a gift section in my budget because gifts seem to be a reoccurring expense. Overall though, I'm pretty happy with my spending habits and it goes in line with what I normally would expect from myself. Some months I was over, some months I was under, and for me, that level of flex is okay. And if you're wondering how I was able to track all this information, it's because I have a spreadsheet where I manually track all my expenses. And there are apps like Mint or YNAB that can make this process a lot easier for you, but I prefer to manually track all my expenses. But before you click away, trust me, it's not that crazy and it's actually a lot easier than it sounds. If you'd like to see a video of me explaining how to use my spreadsheet, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. If I had any advice for students trying to save money in university, I would definitely tell them to have a budget and try to track their expenses. Just making a habit of it will make you more conscious of your spending habits and will help you save money in the long term. Aside from that, here are some other tips that I have. First, if you have roommates, use Splitwise and use it religiously. It's literally godsend. Next one is meal prep. This one sounds obvious, but grocery shopping and meal prepping is a lot healthier and a lot cheaper than eating fast food every single day. Trust me, those $10 meals are going to catch up to you quickly. In terms of grocery shopping, try to shop in season, look for deals, and price match if you can. There's an app called Flip that's great for this and I highly recommend checking it out. You can also look for deals. For example, Fortinos give Mac students 10% off on Tuesdays, and I think Shoppers does as well, so you can check that out. You can also grocery shop or steal food when you're at home. This one doesn't really apply to first years, but pre-game before you go to clubs, bars, or keggers, because usually at those places alcohol is expensive. And this one's a little bit controversial, but sometimes a Mickey and a 30-minute walk is more fun and cheaper than taking an Uber. The last tip that I have is that you only go to university once, and after that you have your whole entire life to work a 9 to 5 and make money. So don't beat yourself up if you overspend too much, but at the same time you should try to save some money. There's a fine balance between the two, and honestly you have to look for what works for you. But other than that, thanks for watching the video if you made it this far. This one was kind of a fun one, so let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please consider liking, subscribing. I plan to make a new video every 2 weeks, so hit the bell notification so you don't miss out. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below or hit me up on Instagram. But other than that, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Later.